I'm Emily Mashak, and you are listening to Tuned In to NoCo, Town Square Media's show that lets you know what matters in NoCo. I'm sitting down today with members of the victim response team at the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, Sue Johnston, coordinator of the team, and Carol Steinbock, a volunteer with the team. So thank you so much for being here today, ladies.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Now, in a nutshell, for those who don't know, what is the victim response team?
Our team provides services to victims of crimes. We offer 24/7 services.
So at every facility or agency in law enforcement, we're required by statute to have a victims response team respond to scenes or by phone to let victims know what their rights are. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what it's about.
And how did you both get involved with the team?
I actually was a volunteer, and then they asked me to come into the office as a temporary employee for like 10 hours a week, and then things changed, and I became the assistant victims response team coordinator, and then I was promoted to the victims response team coordinator.
Well, all the way back in 1994, when the victims response team was first established, I was lucky enough to onboard on the first team that came into play. And I worked for several years, and then I left. And then in about 2009, I came back, and I've been there since. So I've probably done about 15 years.
Very nice. What inspired you to become a volunteer in the first place?
Well, life is not always kind. Bad things happen to good people. And it's just a way of giving back and providing that sort of personal touch when your life feels like it's in shambles.
Well, there was a previous coordinator that asked me to join the team or come in and interview for it because she thought I would be a good fit. I was a little hesitant and kind of learned a little bit more about law enforcement through attending a citizens academy. And then I decided, okay, well, maybe I would try it and see if I was a great fit for that. So that's what I did.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit more about that process of becoming a volunteer? What do you have to go through?
So, unfortunately, the volunteers have to go through the same process as a employee, with the exception of a polygraph, and that's about it, because they are requiring medical now as well. So it starts out with you taking a test that they send out to you. It's like 250 questions. They ask you to return it. After that is passed, you go on to an oral board interview, where you're interviewed by 3 different people, and it's anchor scored. Everyone is given the same questions. And then from there, they give you another test that specifically kind of makes sure that you're still in the process and you can pass the stuff coming forward. And then we do a background investigation, which is fairly lengthy process because unfortunately employees have to go through that first and then volunteers after that, so it can be a lengthy process. And then after that, you're required to do a medical exam.
What have your experiences with the victim response team been like for you over the years?
I think I just have an absolute passion for helping victims of crime, and I think it stems from just kind of being able to listen to people, being able to give them feedback on what maybe would be great resources within the community, collaborating with all of the other agencies and law enforcement, as well as other agencies that are nonprofits that we utilize on a daily basis. I think my experience has been, I'll give 110% and go above and beyond for the agency and for victims because I thoroughly believe that they need to know what they can do going forward, what the court process is going to be, what a trial is going to look like in the future when we make an arrest. Some cases we don't make an arrest right away because a thorough investigation has to be done for like sexual assaults, things like that. So we don't treat anyone differently. We're totally non-judgmental. Everyone is treated the same, from a homicide on down to, just a robbery or a assault victim. We try to treat everyone the same and make sure that they're aware of all of their rights.
And how about you, Carol?
Well, there's a lot of internal camaraderie, so that feels good. And then really, I've made a difference to lots of people's lives, and other people have made a difference in my life by allowing me to be part of their sort of journey when life isn't always kind.
That must be hard to do and see people kind of in that state.
You know, it is, but unfortunately in a world where we're so sort of not in touch with individuals person to person, I think it really makes people feel a little bit more comfortable when everything's more internet-based or not as personal touch.
Mm-hmm. Again, I'm speaking with Sue Johnston, the coordinator of the victim response team with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and Carol Steinbock, a volunteer for the team. So I'm sure every day is very different, especially you mentioned just the difference in crimes. But can you give me a little summary of what a day in the life is like for a volunteer on the team?
So I think for a volunteer, they're very intimidated at first, very nervous at first, but we find that they are just naturals and kind of move right on into it after we do our training. So we give them all pagers, and we give them all the other tools that they're going to need to go out and visit with a victim or talk to them on the phone. And so it can look like they get a phone call they get paged, they make a phone call to a victim and make sure that they've told them what their rights are, explain to them what the next process is, that if there's an arrest made, that there's going to be the court hearing the next day that they're welcome to attend to, those types of things. And then they may not get another call that day, but then they might get a call out to respond to a totally different crime. We also do non-victims' rights crimes, so we are utilized a lot for death notifications or unattended deaths, suicides, floods, fires, things like that. So we're there to listen and give resources and just kind of make sure that they're going into a better path. So we offer short-term resources and long-term resources. So, and then they might not get another call. And then they're required, they always go out in teams of 2. We're on 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And they let us know about the 15th of the prior month what shifts they're available for the following month. And we just kind of speak to them about having them send on a short report as to what's happened on the calls that they've responded to that day by phone or response. And then we follow up in the office with them the following day and kind of get them through the process, attend court with them, see if they need any other resources, make sure they're hooked up with victims' compensation, financial things, and just answer any of the other questions that they may have.
What are you looking for in a volunteer? If one of our listeners wanted to volunteer, what would you give them in the job description?
Well, I think listening, characteristics are, listening, being able to listen and give them feedback of what you've heard. They're saying what their needs are. Sometimes we go out on a call that has nothing to do specifically with the crime that's occurred, but they may need resources for something else. And so we're always trying to gather more resources. And we also always try to make sure that they're aware of all of the resources that we can give them.
You need to be committed. The team, we're all volunteers, and it's really hard on team members when you sign up for a shift and then can't take it. And if you do that too much, then it creates an adverse impact on other people on the team. So really being dedicated and aware of the shifts that you're signing up for. And then, every case is different. So you really have to kind of walk in very neutral when you go to different situations because every person is different.
Mm-hmm. Is it difficult to have an open mind in some situations?
For me personally, no, because I've done it for so long. I think I've been trained well to be able to handle all the various things. That's what I like about being a victim advocate on the front end first responder. Unlike some of the other volunteer bases, they handle more of the day-to-day victim stuff like domestic violence, where maybe they're at the safe house and they're dealing with families, all day long. So being a victim advocate for the sheriff's department, you're really you go to the initial scenario, at least for people like me who only do a 12-hour shift. I don't work the normal day shift. So I usually am at the night shift. And so I truly can just go in, handle the circumstance at hand, and then sort of walk away. So that makes it a little bit easier if you are a person that would get too attached, because that would then not be healthy for you if you spent too much time getting more personally involved in the decisions that individuals make.
Would you say you have to have a strong stomach for the job? Are you going to see some stuff that might make you uncomfortable, or what's that like?
You can see sometimes, unfortunately, we have deaths that we go out on, and they may be in the front living room, and they're doing an investigation, and we may meet with the family in a back room. So sometimes you may see some things that might be a little uncomfortable, but we find that we can, usually the deputies, if you are struggling with something like that, or you tell them in advance, they kind of can step in front of you and walk you down and back to the family, wherever the family is located. So not making that as uncomfortable as it may seem at first. So I think the deputies take care of us, the investigators take care of us. They're not going to call us out to an unsafe scene. It's always going to be a safe scene for us to respond to. We're like family to them. They treat us with the utmost respect, and we work hand in hand, and we work very well together.
That's awesome. Again, I'm speaking with Sue Johnston, the coordinator of the victim response team with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and Carol Steinbock, a volunteer for the team. How have you seen the victim response team impact people in our community? I know that you're a massive support system for the community, but do you have any stories? Obviously, you can't name names of times that you've just really seen it make a difference in someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, there's several calls that come to mind for me, but I think we send out surveys after we go out on calls or respond to calls or phone calls. So we get a lot of feedback from our community members saying, I never knew anything about you. I'm so glad you were there to assist us and tell us what was going to happen going forward. We get a lot of thank you notes in the mail talking about thanking certain advocates that have responded for them. So, and that makes your heart full because it's always nice to hear from community members that specifically name the volunteers that were out there and talk about how wonderful they were. And a lot of them stay in touch with some of our volunteers based on cases. But I would say that there was one that wasn't too long ago that was a child sex assault that I went out on. And it was a difficult case because it was a father that was sexually assaulting this child. And she was very special. And the case went forward very, very quickly, which is unusual on a sex assault. So a phone call was made. One of our light duty deputies took the phone call, was concerned about it, went out and talked to one of our lead investigators. The investigator goes, well, we need to try to get a SANE exam done down at MCR. So I went down to facilitate with that with the SANE nurses at MCR, and I met the mom and her child. And after that, they decided we're going to go right into a forensic interview. And that's an interview that we do through Voices Carry. And they did an interview right away. The mom was terrified that the child was going to have to go back for visitation within the next couple of days with the dad. And this is where these things were occurring. So our investigators were able to put a lot of things together by the disclosure of this child, and there was an arrest made the next day. which is unusual in these types of cases. And so there has been a plea agreement, and he will be sentenced next month. And we have asked this mother and child who's involved with BACA, which is Bikers Against Child Abuse. She's been involved with BACA, and we've asked them to be actual speakers at our National Victims' Rights Week at Civic Center in April, and she has said that she will do that. So then we'll have BACA come in to that ceremony for honoring victims with the child. And so that's a good story. That's an amazing story.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Well, we've had some cases where tragedy has impacted multiple members of a family. And, being Fort Collins isn't a huge city. Sometimes you run into people and we remember each other, at least by face. And then we sort of make the connection because some of these things are all the way back into the early sort of mid-1990s. So, we all change and sort of grow. But I know personally people appreciate having victims come and help them through that sort of first responder. Because the victims response team for the Sheriff's Department is first responders. And then as things go through the court system, there's other victim advocates through other services. When we've had a community sort of tragedy like the floods or the fires, it takes a huge group of people. Doing the fires and doing the floods and how people were so happy to see us. And, one case at that particular time it was the floods. I could remember a couple, they had just purchased a home, and that was their retirement home. And so then the flood came, and they were basically on the roof of their house. And they were getting, the trucks were coming in, picking people up. And so by the time they got to us here in Fort Collins, the only thing they had was a backpack. But the backpack didn't make it on the helicopter. And so it had like their IDs and their credit cards and stuff. And,
oh my goodness.
And the Sheriff's Department in general and all the different agencies that supported that were able to find that couple's backpack and get it to them because, they basically lost everything.
Yeah.
And so it's those kinds of things where the community really does come together in huge tragedies. And even the Larimer County Sheriff's Victims Advocates manned phones, and people would call in to find out if their house had burnt down. You provide a wide variety of services depending on what's going on in the community.
It clearly impacts the community, but how has it impacted both of you over the years since you've been doing this? And again, for those just tuning in, I am talking with Sue Johnston and Carol Steinbock from the Victim Response Team with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office.
I think in my personal life as well, I think I'm more sensitive to people. I feel like it's fulfilling for me to socialize with people and share our experiences. I think anyone that's in this business that helps victims can just, it's so rewarding to help someone and get them to a better place and make connections. And again, I think me included, I still have very close friends that I've made through all of this process, and we still keep in touch, and it's probably the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. And I think I look at my children differently. I look at my grandson differently because of the changes that it's made in me. So I have more patience.
I want to make a difference, and, by sort of showing up and being that sort of compassion, kind person that provides legal information as far as their legal rights in regards to Title 24 of the Colorado statute, knowledge of the legal system, because if you've never really had to maneuver, you don't know what's going to happen the next day if there's an arrest. If you've had a family member who've passed away, not everybody has the opportunity to understand how do I pick a funeral home or any of those things. So we're there to kind of answer those immediate questions.
How can someone become a volunteer? I know we talked a little bit about everything they have to do with background checks and such, but if they're like, on board with that, how do they actually go to sign up?
So there's a website for the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, but it's larimer.org/sheriff. There's a volunteer area. You can click on the volunteers, and then you can go into the victims response team and fill out an application online.
Perfect. Now, can people reach out to the victim response team if they feel like they need it, or is it something that happens after the fact or after a crime that deputies bring in?
No, we have people that call in to get just resources through our office, and so we're glad to give out resources. We've had many people call it, say that they believe that they're in an abusive relationship. What can they do? They're not ready to report. We give them resources within the community. They can always call the sheriff's office and ask for the victims response team unit. It'll go to one of 3 people within our unit. We have 2 victim specialists in our unit, and so they take calls on a daily basis as well. So reach out. We'll be happy to give anyone any resources regarding anything that is going on in their lives.
What do you have to say, in as general or specific as you want to be, about the victim response team that you think our listeners need to know?
Well, like I said before, life's not always kind. Bad things happen to good people. Being part of the Larimer County Sheriff's Department team is a way of giving back to the community. And if you can provide kindness, compassion, access to information, that kind of gets people through sort of the immediate need, and then they can start healing and moving forward with the different services that might be afforded to them.
Definitely. Well, thank you again so much, Sue and Carol, for coming in and talking to me today. It was great to learn about the victim response team, and I'm so glad that we have a resource like this in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Again, that was Sue Johnston, the coordinator, and Carol Steinbock, a volunteer with the victim response team at the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. The volunteer team was established in 1994 to provide services for victims, and today people like Carol and Sue are making sure that victims have the support and resources they need in Larimer County. If you're interested in learning more about the victim response team or want to learn about how you can volunteer, visit larimer.org/sheriff/investigations/victim-response-team.